a vast number of employers here or various different industries. How would they know what modern award actually applies to them?
Okay, so the challenge that you'll have, and this is a quite unique situation in Australia with our modern award system, is there is no one who can definitively tell you with any force of law which award applies to your staff other than a judge in the federal court or a judge in the federal magistrates court. So unless any of you have that in your family, so if any of you have a brother or sister who's a judge, please let me know because I would love to speak with them. But none of you, including me, give you a definitive answer about which one award applies. And there are countless examples of employers who have actually obtained advice from the Fair Work Ombudsman, who has the responsibility of telling you which award applies to you. There are countless examples I could give you of employers who have done that, relied upon that information, only to then be told later that information was wrong, and you should have been providing this different award entitlement. And on an example of that I would give you is a company called Popper, which is based in Melbourne. There, the owner of the business actually wrote to the Fair Work Ombudsman each year and said which award applies to my staff, and he relied upon that information and was then subsequently inspected by a Fair Work inspector, and they decided differently, and he faced back payments in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And ultimately, he was successful in arguing against them, but it was quite an unfortunate process. So the only way that you really, the best that you can do to find the right award is a 4-step process. You need to look through all of the awards that exist. There are 122 of these modern awards. So you look through all of them, just by title if you like. And what you need to know is that there are 2 different types of modern awards. There are industry awards and there are occupational awards. You should always start with the industry award that might apply to your industry first. And then what you're doing is you're looking in that for a classification that would cover the employee that you have in mind. If you can't find a classification for that employee in the industry award, then you would look to an occupational award. Then, if you find an occupational award that would cover them, the final step then is to look to see whether or not the employee is expressly. I'll use a practical example. Use an accounting firm, for example. We'll find that there is no industry award for accountants. There is a banking, finance and insurance award, but it does not cover accounting firms in private practice. So, let's say we're talking about someone who works here and they do an administrative type function. So, first of all, we look for an industry award. There isn't one. Okay? So then you go to the next step. You go, well, is there an occupational award? And then we would find there is an award called the Clerk's Private Sector Award for 2010, and that's an award that covers people engaged in clerical type functions right across the country. So now you've found an occupational specific award. You'll then look in that award for a classification that matches up with what the person does. So then you discover that the award does exist and it does apply to that person. That would also tell you the minimum rate that you would need to pay the employee. And then the final step would be to look to see whether or not there is any express exclusions. And the most common exclusion is what we call the high income threshold. So if someone earns above a certain amount per year, they are then excluded from having that award apply to their employment. And the current high income threshold, I believe, is around $123,000. So if the person's earning less than that, guaranteed less than that, then they are covered by that. So that's the process that you go through. Very important to distinguish between the NES and the awards. So yeah, and then the reason I want to make that distinction is because the NES applies to everyone, regardless of whether there is a modern award for them. So if someone's employed under the Fair Work system, which is pretty much everyone in the private sector, apart from some exceptions in WA because of a different situation they have there, everyone is in effect covered by the NES. So that means someone who's the CEO of a bank earning $20 million a year gets the same NES entitlements as Jim who works in the local bakery 3 days a week on a pro rata basis. Right? So they've got the same NES entitlements. The difference is the bank CEO doesn't have an award that applies to him, but the person working in the bakery would. All right? Coming to your question about, are there many occupations or industries where there are no modern awards? No, very, very few. So the example that I gave is accountants. Accountants are award-free. Lawyers in private practice are award-free. So there are certain industries or occupations that are exempt. But when the Fair Work system was introduced and we went through this award modernisation process, the government and the minister at the time, who was Julia Gillard, made it very, very clear that anyone who was covered by an award under the old system should not drop out of the award system as a result of the modern awards coming into effect. So to do that, what they did was they created one final award, which is called, it's my favourite, the miscellaneous award. of 2010. So what that means is if you had someone who was covered by an old, say, New South Wales award, and you can't find a new modern award that would cover them, because none of those coverage clauses or classifications seem to match up, chances are they are caught then by the miscellaneous award, because the idea is they shouldn't drop out of the award system. And it worked the other way as well, so there were many people who were award-free before, who have suddenly now found themselves caught up in the modern award system. And that wasn't necessarily intended. So there is some scenario where it's gone the other way. Certainly if you were covered by an award before, you were definitely covered by something, some sort of award.